Hello and welcome to the podcasting panel at the Illusion HorrorCon 2024. My name's Scott Dorward. It's my great pleasure to introduce a panel of podcasters with a wide variety of experience, and I'm certainly looking forward to hearing what to bring to this. So let's start by introducing each one of you, and if you can say something about the podcasts that you work on, then as well as yourself from there. So, John, you're the first on my screen. Why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Scott. My name is John Hook. I am a podcaster and writer. My current podcast is called Modern Mythos. It is a podcast that specializes on talking about investigative horror role-playing games, primarily Call of Cthulhu, but we do try and bring in other games as well, and other games that you can introduce elements of investigative horror into those games. So it could be fantasy games, and it could be a variety of different sci-fi games, and just, all kinds of games. My co-host on that is YouTuber Seth Swerkowski, and Modern Mythos has been going on for about, I think we're going into our third year, and it is primarily a discussion podcast, but we also release through the same stream some actual plays. We do some role playing, where I'm the Call of Cthulhu role playing, and I'm the keeper for that. So it's been a lot of fun, and I've been podcasting for quite some time, but we can probably get into that at a later time.
Yeah, because you were actually one of the people who inspired me to get into podcast in the first place, John. Your work on the Miskatonic University podcast, which started out, like 15 years ago or so, or almost.
Right, yeah. The Miskatonic University podcast, launched that with Brian and Dan, and eventually we brought Chad in. And that was a long time ago. That was even before my daughter was born. So it was a long time.
Right. And Brandon. Welcome.
So my name is Brandon Fischella, Brandon F on YouTube, because I'm not terribly creative with my naming conventions. I am primarily a historian, so I'm a little bit of an odd man out with this crowd, I will admit. But I've appeared on numerous podcasts as a result of that. I have, again, a YouTube channel where I produce a wide variety of everything from documentaries and more traditional lectures to film and game critiques for their historical accuracy and how people use history in their narratives, all that sort of thing. And I have a little bit of experience with live streaming in that field as well and whatnot. So I'm sure I'll be able to throw a few interesting things in here and there. I'm primarily interested in history from a social perspective, from, you might say, like the man on the ground perspective. I was just telling everyone before we started here how so much of military history is so obsessed, right, with like the division moved from this position to that position, and then they went over the hill and blah, 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 or like the exact caliber of the different firearms. And I try to get away from all of it, like if you look at my background, I try to get away from like all of this. And I like to focus more on like, hey, like that guy, oh, you can't see my hand. That guy right there, how is he feeling right now? What's going through his head as he's going through, the personal perspective.
Basketball,
and so I think that, a lot of that really, yeah. I think that a lot of that can relate to tabletop role-playing games as well, because it ultimately has like the same kind of aim. So, anyways, yeah, that's me. Hi.
Welcome. And Travis, welcome to you too.
Hello, I'm Travis Vengroft. I'm half a Fool and Scholar Productions. My wife and I started podcasting as a hobby, I think 8 years ago. We somehow were lucky enough that our fiction podcasts became of interest enough for people to us to do it full time, still as a two-person team. We've been unreasonably fortunate, and we've gotten somehow like 50 million downloads and over 100 awards, and we do this full time. We get to work with actors and make fiction stories and scare people because we love making horror. That's kind of our jam. Historical fiction actual play, fantasy, any genre of horror you can think of, sci-fi, we go there. On the actual play side, you might know me for Dark Dice as the dungeon master or co-dungeon master of that show. It's a 5e horror actual play. Also Liberty after, we've got Liberty Vigilance, the Liberty feed, which is another actual play, and also guest on a number of actual play podcasts out there. So I'm on sort of both sides of fiction, doing the scripted stuff, the unscripted stuff, and editing it to a ridiculous degree because my background is a bit of music, but a lot of sound design, which I've learned by doing sound design for our podcasts. And that's what I do.
Oh, fantastic. Now, it strikes me that podcasting is a fairly young medium. It's got to be, about 20 years since the first podcast started out. And not too many people, I think, at least to begin with, really set out to become podcasters. I think it's a thing that a lot of people sort of stumbled into. How did each of you get involved with this sort of weird new medium?
So a long time ago, I mean, I'm still a fan of comic books. I still collect comic books. I enjoy that hobby. And in 2000 or so, I was 99 and 2000. I was doing some writing, right? I was doing some self-published writing of comic books and stuff like that. Had a really good time with that. And someone, and I wish I could remember his name as I'm trying to talk and tell this story, but he wanted to start this podcast and to talk about weekly comic books, what was coming out, what we were reading. And his habit was, when he would collect his comics each week, is he would put the ones that he was looking forward to the most at the bottom of his stack of his reading pile. So he would work his way down to the ones that he was most anticipating each week. So we started a podcast called Bottom of the Stack. And we would talk about the books that we were, collecting each week and what we're doing. And I'm sure it is lost to time. I don't know if you could ever find any of those episodes again. But I was on Bottom of the Stack. That was the first podcast I was ever on. And we did that, sporadically for a while. It was not very, we weren't very timely with it and that dedicated to it. But it was because I had the experience of doing that and the equipment we used. First off, I was not involved in any of the production for Bottom of the Stack. I don't know what he was doing to get it recorded and put online, or all of that was just magic to me. I was very, and for the most part, I feel like I still am quite ignorant of technical things in the podcasting realm. Like I know just enough to be dangerous. I was using a headphones Logitech, crappy little Logitech mic, right? That was my recording setup. Jacked right into the laptop. So having that experience, when Dan Kramer was posting on the yogsothoth.com community message boards about wanting to start a podcast for the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, and he was putting an open call out for people who might be interested, I responded immediately because I was such an idiot. I was like, I've done a podcast. I could totally do this. So I responded, and apparently from what Dan was saying, I was first person to respond to him. And then Brian Murphy was the second. And Dan was like, well, it'll be you and me. What do you think about this Brian guy? So yeah, let's have a third, right? So we brought Brian in. And so the three of us kicked it off. And then after we were doing it for a while, Chad came in and everything. But even back then, I was still doing it with the Logitech headset, and I did that for a long time. And I did not know, again, nothing about the production of it. Dan was doing all the technical stuff. Brian was like learning it on the fly, and so he could be a backup for him. And I just like a prima donna. I just showed up to talk, right? I didn't do anything. I eventually, have started to learn everything, but the work that they were doing, it's hard, right? I do it now, and I'm like, why do I do this to myself? But it is fun. So, but yeah, I was doing podcasting like in 99 and 2000 on and off for quite a while. And then, we started Miscount University in 11, I think, 2011.
Yeah, probably around then.
My daughter was born in 2012, and so I know we started it before she was born.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how about you, Brandon? How did you get into
I was going to say, I think I can relate to that in quite a few ways. The whole idea of like having no idea how this technological wizardry happens and yet like stumbling through it to slowly improve. I just figured out how you can make like a moving picture like this for my green screen background. That's very sophisticated for me. Yeah, I mean, my training is, all of my degrees are in either history or philosophy and other completely unemployable fields. And I started first making YouTube videos when basically I had just gotten into military reenactment. So, those crazy guys who wear the old-timey costumes and pretend to shoot each other in the woods. I'm one of those weirdos. And I had this, this nice full like $3,000 outfit of a British Fusilier, and I'm like, you know what? All those guys like Schola Gladiatoria, like waving the swords around, and Lindy Beige and Scalagrim, and like it was sort of a field where people would do like short little history talks on YouTube. And I started to sort of think to myself, like, I could do something. Like, there wasn't at the time, I don't think, all too many people doing that for, like, 18th century, linear warfare, musketeer type stuff. So I'm like, I could be that guy. I could get into that. I have since learned that short history vignettes are not my strong suit. I like to ramble. But, for some ungodly reason or another, as I'm sure many of us can relate, people started watching and listening to it. It was a slow burn. When my first ever video, a few videos that I made, I had a GoPro camera. I had a little GoPro Hero Session, little inch by inch cube that I basically taped to a lamppost because I had no other equipment. And it was just me with a fisheye lens talking about like why soldiers wore bearskin caps, for example. But bit by bit over time, it slowly sort of started gathering a little bit of an audience. I started getting into like film critique and more involved, like more scripted, more documentary style videos. Like it's a very like complimentary way to put it, documentary style. Yeah, it's been a very, very slow process of teaching myself new techniques, new new ways of like editing the videos and ways that I can blend different like voiceover and in person with B-roll and all yada yada yada. I think that I'm still very much in the learning phase for a lot of that, but it has become significant enough at least to where my rambles on whatever topic under the sun, I go from basically like 1764 to 1918 is my usual range, and it has been sufficient to allow me to do YouTube and related activities full time. I very recently actually was able to publish a book to thankfully because my audience has grown to a significant enough scale. And so I'm dabbling in different fields. I'm exploring different things. But yeah, it really all just started because I had the outfit. I loved history, talking about history to my friends, and I saw these other, all these other schmucks on YouTube who were doing something similar, and I thought I could probably get into that too. Like I can talk about history stuff, and here we are.
You mentioned, I think, before we started recording that you'd done some actual play stuff as well. Is that
very little bit? So,
right.
Yeah. The only time that I had done a live streamed tabletop role playing game was when I was contacted by a Ukrainian gentleman named Anton, who was responsible for a game called Architectica, just very like secret societies, mystery, vague French Revolution kind of time period. And he was interested in having me promote the game a little bit, just with a sponsored video, and in appearing in one of the play sessions. So I did so with a couple of the individuals from the Illusion and Horror the event that we're all watching. And that was a very unique experience because I had played many of those games before, just like, with friends, in the basement on our own and whatnot, but never like in a more fixed environment, if that makes sense. So it was a different experience for me, but it was definitely a lot of fun. I'd like to do it more, I think, actually, if that's if the opportunities ever present themselves.
Yeah, I think as the conversation goes on, we'll perhaps drill in a little more into the what actually defines an actual play podcast and how different they are from just playing for fun.
Sure.
But before we get into that, Travis, how about you? How did you get into all this?
I'm a bit like John, actually. I was making these comic books, and I noticed you had to like pay an artist to make the art for every idea you have as a writer, and then you have to like print them, which costs a lot of money, and then you have to go to a convention to sell them because I couldn't get distributed through Diamond as the only one distributor, and it's expensive and it's tough. So my then girlfriend, now wife, Caitlin, and I said, what if we like did something fun together, like as a creative thing that wasn't comics? What if we like either programmed or went into podcasting, into like a fiction podcast? In about a day, we could get to Hello World and programming. And then we're like, okay, we're never going to make this video game. And then the other side, in a day, we realized very quickly I'm a terrible writer. She wrote a script for this lovely new podcast. And I was like, I've done a little bit of music editing. I think I can maybe edit voices. We've got one microphone. I've got a friend who knows how to voice act. He took a course once. And I've got some family members who've been in theater at some point in their lives. I think if we're half the cast here, just the two of us, and we've got them, we've got a show. And then we did. And I didn't know how to upload it or anything, so I joined a network, and I said, okay, put this out into the ether. However you do this. But our show got more popular than the entire network in like the first month. We exceeded 10 downloads. We exceeded more people than I knew, and 100 downloads and 200 downloads. It was unreal for us. So we very quickly just said, okay, we'll host it ourselves. We'll do it ourselves, and we'll try and do this thing because the network was no longer supporting us. We were now basically supporting the entire network. It was a bit weird. And then we started this other show, The White Vault, which is a horror podcast, and we couldn't get people to audition for it. It was really tough because we were so small. Even still, with a couple hundred listeners, no one really paid attention to us outside. It was tough to find someone who could speak German, someone from Germany, someone who could speak Spanish from Mexico City. So we did our best. We put out our first season, and it was even more popular than anything we'd ever done before, again, which surprised us. And around that time, we realized we could maybe be doing this as a career because our Patreon had been doing okay. So at some point, we realized that we were now like in the top 1% and sort of trying to like predict and learn while doing the thing, while trying to like, podcasting is not a career. You don't tell like your father-in-law, like, I'm a podcaster. That's not, but I am. And I have to figure out like, how do we survive? How do we adapt? How do we grow? And how do we innovate in this really strange field with RSS, and which is how you distribute a podcast. It's different from doing a YouTube video. It's always changing, and it's always alive. And then at one point we did a live show, but we wanted to meet the cast because they were from various parts of Europe and North America. We'd never met them before because I just send them a script and they send me the recordings back and I edit it together. I don't meet people because we're cheap like that. I didn't at the time. So we did this Icebreaker. It was a D&D game. I was going to DM it. It was horror themed because The White Vault's a horror podcast. We wanted to see how weird they were before staying in an Airbnb with them for a week. And it was a lot of fun. And we recorded it because why not? I thought it'd be a bonus episode, but it wound up being its own show. There's a whole reason behind that, but it became its own show and the show got popular, and that's kind of one of our big shows. And we continue making The White Vault. I'm working on an episode right now, trying to figure out a model of helicopter that I had the recording for and EQing it right. And then right before we got on this call, and we're making other podcasts as well. I think 7 of them, but most of them are in cryo sleep, happily with their stories resolved, until maybe we make a sequel or something.
Oh, fantastic! And yeah, something you touched on there is, I think, something that perhaps people starting out making podcasts don't realize, or have unrealistic expectations of, which is how long it takes sometimes to find an audience. I know certainly when we started the Good Friends of Jackson Elias, any kind of audience beyond like the people we knew at conventions. And yeah, it slowly snowballed from there and became a lot more popular than we ever expected. But those early years, we were doing it just because we enjoyed doing it. And the fact that there were a couple of hundred weirdos out there who were listening to it was a bonus, but mostly it was just an excuse for us to get together and talk into a microphone and have fun.
Absolutely. That's really the appeal. I love telling stories, and I love not having to leave my home to do so. So it's the marriage of not having to sell you a comic book. You can just have it for free, and it's the full thing, and you don't have to like pay attention. You can do it while you're cooking or something else or cleaning.
Yeah. On the topic of of time scale and how I think a lot of people don't appreciate, or it's I shouldn't say that, it's hard to imagine when you're getting started, because I think we all sort of like, or not everyone, but like, it's, you upload that first video and you're like, oh boy, is it gonna, like, how's it gonna take off? And I remember like having a dream when I like uploaded my first video that I would wake up and it would have like 100 views overnight. It's like, well, no, of course not. It took me a year or so to get to like my first 100 subscribers. And I remember I remember when I hit like 80 something, I had like a little update video, and like I was so sheepish and like in awe, because that was like an insane number to me. And then it took me another year after that to get to my first like 1 or 2,000, something around there, 1,000. And then like the next year, just one of my videos decided to just, it just happened, and that was when I like shot up to like 20,000, and and from there it sort of gets into the snowball pattern on its own. But like I remember my 1,000 subscribers special, and I had been doing this sort of thing like at multiple milestones for myself, but I made a little video where I went into like a video game, into a strategy game called Napoleon Total War, and I lined up 1,000 soldiers and I had them do a little parade. And I made a video like, look, everyone, it's all of you. And I'm like the general. It's so much fun. But yeah, it was just like trying to picture, like you said, it's like, wow, this is more people than like I'm close friends with. This is more people than I've told this about. Like, there's at least 1 or 2 people who found this just like in the ether and decided it's worth their time, which is humbling and scary and surreal and cool.
It's it is very much all of those things. And I saw an article a few years back, and I can't imagine this has changed an awful lot, that said that the average podcast has something like 4 or 5 episodes, and then peters out. Very few of them ever catch out. I mean, that's something like 90%, I think, of podcasts don't last more than the first 4 or 5 episodes. And as a result, the average listenership for podcasts is much, much lower than you might expect, because, those numbers bring it way down. It does, I think, probably get quite disheartening when you're in that stage of just looking at that tiny number of downloads and thinking if you're trying to build an audience, just wondering when it's going to happen. And I think patience is the lesson. I mean, it sounds like each of us has been in that position where it would have been very easy to give up early, but we didn't.
I echo that. And statistically, if you have 50 downloads per episode, I think you're in the top 50% or so. I know if you hit 300 downloads, you're in like the top 70%. You're already like on fire. And that's a new episode release within 30 days. That's the metric that people are following. You can also just Google that and it'll pop up. The download just released those as well on their podcast, because they're podcast news, all you need to know. Stuff, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I think John, you mentioned it before. Like it really has to start out with just you just having fun, right? It's something that you enjoy. You're in front of the camera or the microphone, whatever it is, and just sort of enjoying it. And then like if it goes somewhere from there, then fantastic. But it's like if you don't enjoy it at its core, if you don't find the activity itself rewarding, then it's gonna die out, because it will not happen overnight. Like I do believe that there is an audience out there for pretty much everything, so long as like you can clean it up in an appropriate way. But it takes a lot of time.
I mean, I'm on a second podcast. I've started a second podcast about the topic of the Call of Cthulhu role playing game. So my Modern Mythos podcast is very similar to what the Miskatonic University podcast was. The only reason why I made the change is Miskatonic University podcast, we recorded, and I did this for almost 10 years, over 9 years. We recorded 2 episodes a month without missing a beat. I did that twice a month for 9+ years. And I was just getting worn out. And I was like, I have to drop this by half. And so one of the tenets in launching the Modern Mythos was, we're going to talk about basically the same stuff once a month. I'm just doing one show a month. And it'll be so much easier to edit and put together, and it's once a month. And I changed the formatting a little bit too, because in the other show, it was launched when Dan was putting it together. He had this idea. It was kind of like following I'm not sure what his format or what his genesis was for this, but he was like trying to mirror a show where it had different segments, and so each segment kind of had a bumper, to kind of intro each segment, right? And it was kind of fun. But after years of that, I started thinking, this feels kind of gimmicky. It almost kind of felt, to me, it felt almost kind of like morning zoo radio, right? Hey, Zingo, hit the bumper, and then you hear the little thing, and then you go into the next segment, right? And I was like, I'm kind of done with that, right? So, we were also doing like a news segment, and news segments really anchor that episode to that point in time. And I was kind of falling out of love with that, because I didn't want the episodes to feel date specific. I wanted a show that was going to hopefully be, every episode could be evergreen. People could listen to it right when it was launched, and they could listen to it 5 years from now, and hopefully the information is still entertaining and relative and stuff like that, because I didn't want to anchor it to anything that had to do with, pardon my throat there, had to do with anything set in time. So I wanted to get away from that as well. And so that's what we do with that now. But I was your tolerance, you not only get better at doing the thing that you're doing, which, Travis, my God, just to hear your scale, right? I'm like, I wish I was that gifted. God, you're like
it's just hours. I just have too much time.
Too much time. Okay, well, all right. I'll take that.
That is a gift as well, isn't it?
It is a gift. It is truly a gift. But yeah, you not only get better at what you're doing, but then your tolerance for it and the way that you want to work-life balance it into your life, can morph as well. And so I've kind of gone through that little shift, and so for now, the way that Seth and I run and do Modern Mythos fits for my style, and hopefully, it's still seems that people enjoy hearing. I mean, it's just an opinion show, really, right? So people enjoy hearing my opinions on and perspective on the Call of Cthulhu role playing game, and like hearing me as a game master when I'm running actual plays.
Can I add 2.5 things to that real quick? I think that are
please.
important. You touched on them, and I think like these are vital. So one, if you want to make money, don't go into podcasting. But if you want to grow an audience, and you're trying to be doing that, and you're trying to get your show to be more successful, in air quotes, if you define success as listenership, consistent releases are a big thing. And if it's monthly, you commit to monthly.
Yeah.
Like that's your thing, you're monthly. Or if you're like every 2 weeks, or you can even change it. Just announce what you're doing to your audience, and you can change it. And the second thing is a sneaky thing that most people don't realize. So every Friday the 13th, I'll start with a better example. I released an episode that I wasn't particularly proud of. I made a couple of mistakes, rookie errors. Also, there was a revolution in Chile, and one of our lead voice actors couldn't get to a booth. It was tough. So I put out something, and it wasn't as good as it could have been. But then like 3 weeks later, I changed it because it's RSS. Yeah. What does it mean? You can literally go back in and re-upload your episode and change it, and it's like it was never there. So every Friday the 13th on Dark Dice, if you're listening, certain episodes are darker and different because we're just for that 24 hours, I'm uploading a different episode with a different, like, darker ending. So you can be really creative with RSS, and even if you do have a news segment, you can remove it. Or you can put a dynamic ad insertion, and instead of putting an advertisement, you could just put topical news for like the week. There are ways around that you could potentially, if you're using like an Acast as a host or a Megaphone as a host, get around those barriers so that people are maybe not hitting it as hard. But also keep in mind that it will hit every ticker where you have those dynamic ad insertion markers. So every episode would have the same news piece on that day when they downloaded it. But you can do some really creative things. And the medium itself, not enough people explore what you can do. And another history show, I think it's 83, Lincoln assassination, all that stuff going on. Like their ending of their season finale, like he got a lot of negative reviews. So he just changed it. And then everyone loved it. He took the feedback and said, you know what, we can do better. And they did. And people love it now.
Interesting.
So I implore you to expand in your mind on RSS.
That idea of on Friday the 13th changing the content, just be like a little bit like what's it, like Mandela effect, a little scary. Like that is coming. I love that.
And it's happening this Friday. Cool. Like this Friday, different people will die, and like
this Friday
multiple episodes will change things up. I have to plan ahead because we add a new episode every Friday the 13th. It's work, but it's just like
that's awesome.
No one knows it. We don't get like paid for it. We don't really advertise it that much. But like you said, we're doing this because we like telling stories. We like talking about the things we're passionate about.
For the people who realize that that's happening, that has got to be like the coolest revelation, right? Like especially if you're not told it, but you just like notice.
Well, then they go back and it's different.
Yeah, that's really weird. That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. And another reason to go back and perhaps replace some of those episodes is because I think we've probably all had this experience to some extent. I mean, certainly John mentioned it there, which is we've all kind of grown up in public a bit. We've all developed these podcasts, learning our craft as we're going. And I know Cuppy Cup, who I work quite a lot with on Ain't Slayed Nobody, has got into the habit. I mean, I tease him about it, but it's actually kind of a good thing. When he learns some new production techniques and learns how to improve the audio quality a bit, he will very often go back and remaster old episodes and tidy stuff up and just punch them up a bit, or even just edit them and tighten up bits that didn't work, and then just silently replace them so that people going to the main campaign arc on this actual play will get a better experience than new listeners. And I think that's well worth doing if you have the time and the inclination.
Also listen to Ain't Slayed Nobody. It's a great podcast.
Oh, thank you. It sounds like we all have some experience of the technical side of podcasting here then, to varying degrees. And we've sort of danced a bit around just how much bloody work goes into creating these things. Obviously, it's going to vary an awful lot because it sounds like Travis, particularly, you go to some extents that the rest of us might not. But if you're starting out a podcast, it's going to depend, on the kind of podcast it is, whether it's a talk podcast, actual play podcast, whether it's an audio drama. But at the very least, there's going to be a lot of prep that goes into it up front, perhaps some research. There's going to be the recording itself. There's going to be the editing and the post-production afterwards. There's going to be the promotion of it. So, I mean, how much of that work do you tackle yourself, and how much does it break you?
It's a good question.
Who wants to go first? John, do you want to start us off?
Oh, sure. I am inherently lazy, so I try and do as little as possible. So with Modern Mythos, we do have a couple of editors that we hire, and thankfully we have a robust enough Patreon support that I'm in a position where I'm able to compensate my editors for all their hard work. They're amazing guys. I love what they do, and they are the ones that make Seth and I sound great. But we have a really simple format for the show. Since I took out the format of having bumpers throughout the show and everything, we just simply open the show, talk about our topic. We've recently added sponsors, and so we just do a live sponsor segment, in the show as we do it. So we'll talk about the sponsor, we'll talk about our topic, we'll thank the sponsor, we'll thank any new patrons, and then we do a closing segment. And none of that is segmented. None of that is piecemealed. We still do a live opening with every episode. We do a live closing with every episode, and we will meta talk about it and go, we should record this at some point and just tack it on at the end. And I go, yeah, we should, but we never make time for it. And so it's an in joke now. So we just do it live every time, even though we're reading from a script. It works for us, And
genuine, you could say.
It is. I mean, because every time, every episode, it is a genuine conversation as we're having it, and it will be slightly nuanced and different each time we do it. And sometimes there's flubs and things like that, and we laugh about that and make fun of ourselves. And because the show is very casual, it is meant to feel like we're all sitting at the same table and we're all having this conversation together, right? We're all in a living room together having this conversation. It's not meant to feel, that separated, like we're apart from you. And so when our editors get the show, we do have music that we have, licensed music that the band, the owners of the music have granted us use of it. So the editors, really all they do is they put that music on at the very front and at the very end. They go through the episode to take out my abusive amount of ums and ahs in it to try and make me sound much smarter than I actually am. I think my IQ actually goes up a few points after they've edited. See, there's another so they just kind of tighten up any of the lag and gap in the show. So if we've recorded and it came in at 70 minutes, I mean, it might be a really tight 59 minutes after editing. I mean, it just gets really pretty tight in there. So hopefully it's not too heavy of a lift for our editors to go through and do that work. And I even asked them to make it even lighter, a lighter edit touch when we do our APs or our actual plays. But yeah, it's I'm not sure how long it takes for them to do the editing. Hopefully not that long, but it's usually pretty quick because it's just each person who's in it, because each person is recorded separately, and so they'll just blend those together and do the tack-ons on the front and back, and that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can probably give you some idea because that sounds very similar to the process I use when I edit The Good Friends of Jackson Elias. And I probably, at least for a first pass edit on that, for each hour of audio, that's probably about 5 or 6 hours of editing. It used to be a lot more, but I've kind of sped up. But I'm very finicky about it. I'm constantly adjusting stuff and adjusting levels and pacing all the way through it. And I mean, it used to take me about 10 hours, but I've got better at it.
Very nice.
Yeah, I find for video production, sort of a similar scale. It's like for every minute of final footage that I put out there, it'll be anything from like 5 to 20 minutes of work altogether, probably like 5 to 10 minutes of editing time. It's I think video is both a blessing and a curse in relation to podcasting because on the one hand, I if I give an or an I can leave that in, at least for the video portion, because what I've actually found is whenever I'm in front of a camera, I'm a little terrified. There's a bit of an anxiety about it. Like even after all these years, it's never gone away. And so I sort of like elevate my tone a little bit. I have a bit more of a lecture tone when I'm in a video, and like people will meet me in real life and like, oh, you sound so different. I'm like, yeah, it's because I'm not terrified, right? I'm not on camera. I'm not staring into the depths of the little black box right now. But what I've found, funnily enough, is I am able to pretty effectively like parody myself, right? Because I have such a specific way of speaking on these videos that it becomes something of a character all its own. And so as I'm explaining these concepts, I take on different tones of voice, things like that, right? And so like, it's if there's like a slight stumble or a pause, or if it's a bit of emotional or whatever, like that can play into it, right? Like if you make a mistake, like you said, John, on the outro, that can be part of it. It makes it more genuine, and that's actually desirable to keep, right? But then on the other end is if I'm not removing every as I sort of like am rattling off ideas, because it's a video format, I do need to find visual aids for everything. And because I'm doing history content and like academic content, a lot of the times that means I need very specific images to demonstrate what I'm talking about. If I'm talking about a Napoleonic soldier with his Belgic shako, heaven forbid I find one with like a bell top shako, because that would be, everyone would see it would be wrong. It would be, I'm very pedantic, right? So I need very specific images, very specific things for everything that I'm talking about. And that's where most of the time comes in for myself. I would love to get more into sound design and music, and like if I'm describing the soldiers marching through the mud to have like the sound effect, and I'd like to get more into that world, but it's like it's pretty intimidating for me as of right now. So that I think that's like the next step in my overall progression, but I'm still working on where I am, I think, overall.
Yeah. How about you, Travis?
I'm on the opposite side of the fence. So I'm going to just keep it to actual play because that's the topic of the day here. For me, for a 40-minute episode of an actual play, I'm looking at around 120 to 130 hours of work on my end for those 40 minutes. Now, that includes not just me, that's everyone involved, because there were people playing the game. And when those people played the game, I include their hours for each person, right? Because that's their time too. So we're recording the audio, everything except the latest thing we recorded, which won't come out for like 2 or 3 years because I'm a slow editor. And I'm creating multiple shows a year. It was recorded remotely The newest one was recorded with these cool lapel Nemono sound capsule things.
Oh,
You
wow.
put them on your.
Wow.
Oh,
They're fancy. They negate other voices around you, and they're fun. But then, like after you play the game and you've recorded it, I pay someone to do like an edit pass. Like, please spend 8 hours on this 4-hour session, and just cut out anything repetitive, because I don't want to hear repetitive information. Like it's the stuff like I roll a 3 or roll an investigation check. An investigation? Yes, investigation. Okay, I got to find my dice.
Yeah.
The 20-sided one?
Yeah.
Yes. And then basically investigation 3, done.
Yeah.
Moving on. So they cut it down from like 4 hours to maybe 220 or 320, which is lovely. Then it gets transcribed, which takes time and effort. And then from the transcription, we edit that. I hate my own voice a lot, so I will remove myself as DM out as much as possible by getting voice actors who we're very fortunate to work with to take on any NPC roles.
Oh wow,
And
that's fun.
like that's the thing I've done since the beginning, just because I don't like my voice. So if I can swap myself out, that's lovely. And then you've got like this lively cast to be with our cast, our players, and then I get to the sound effects piece where okay, magic and all the different things. But then you get these ideas. You've got sound
wonderful.
effects, right? But then on top of sound effects, you're thinking like, okay, well, there's motion and Foley. Foley, what's Foley? It's the sound of movement in the scene. When you've got tense dialogue and nothing's really happening, how do you know it's happening? So you've got this old cleric priest and he's wearing chainmail. So every time he moves, it's like, I hear what you've said. So just that like little bit of subtle movement with them is now a big deal. But then I got more into it, and you've got like people who wear leather, and leather is hard to replicate, so I use ropes because I'm vegan. So it's like all like, they're gonna lean in. What do you see? I see that. Okay, these little tricks that kind of add up and
That's
up,
wonderful.
or like rubbing cloth if they're not wearing leather or chainmail, and you've got maybe more of a contemporary setting or closer to the 1800s. So these sound effects things take a lot of time. And then mixing and mastering and the ambiences, trying to create the locations. I take a recorder and go crazy places. Our latest story, The White Vault, has this terrifying wind noise. It's actually just me at our home because it's very windy here and it's a very loud house. But
I love those stories. I love, I'm sorry to interject.
No,
I remember hearing when George Lucas was making Star Wars, the sound effect, I think it's of the blasters, or maybe it's of the spaceships when they shoot their guns. Those guys would go out to with sound equipment to just try and collect noises, and so they were walking along a series of like power lines that have those like support cables that hold them rigid and standing up.
Yeah.
And those things are tight, right? Those cables are super tight. And so they
make all
had
sorts of crazy noises.
yeah, and so they had a wrench with them, and so they would go and strike that cable with a wrench and just record that toing, that happens from that. And that is, the pew pew pew, and I was just as a kid, I was fascinated by that, and hear the way that Foley and stuff works is super awesome.
Yeah, and like the way King Kong's cry was something like a jaguar played backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
If you, as a little aside on the same point, the way that they made the documentary "They Shall Not Grow Old," which, if you're not familiar, it's Peter Jackson basically went back, took a whole bunch of First World War footage, slowed it down to an appropriate frames per second, colorized it, added voice acting and sound effects, and the way that they had all the artillery sounds, because that was a major part of it. They had an entire segment showing the guns. And they're like, oh, well, how are we going to do this? And Peter Jackson was like, oh, I have a howitzer. Let's just go into So they just went and they fired off his howitzer, and they used that for some of the recording. But that was likewise a fascinating procedure of like, well, how are we going to get the noise for hundreds of boots moving through this thick, wipers mud or the duck boards, and how they were even using, how they could like study. They had people who could like do lip reading to figure out what these people were saying roughly to add the words into their mouth. It's a fascinating, and it really speaks, I think, especially with what you do, Travis, is how we're able to use whatever our medium is to its greatest advantage, right? It's like if you're on a podcast, that's more than just people talking, right? It gives you a lot of opportunities to build a more cohesive experience, and you really have to use that as much as you possibly can. For my part, if I'm making a video, it's like, oh, well, great. I can not only talk about these concepts, but I can show you these concepts. I can say, hey, if you look at this like sketch right here, or this painting or this photograph, you can see, the lines on his uniform because he was wearing his belt in this way, and that indicates this other thing. Like, there are ways that you can take advantage of the medium that you're using. And I think, like, regardless of what you're doing, like if you're standing in front of a camera, for example, you should really ask yourself, okay, well, why am I standing here in front of the camera as opposed to doing it any other way? What advantage does that give us, right? What's the narrative purpose for it? Because whether it's fiction, nonfiction, a game, a story, whatever, there's always a narrative that you're putting forward, right?
I wanted to go back to something Travis said that just interested me. It's a small point, but you were talking about how you don't like hearing your own voice. And I think everyone who does podcasts or videos goes through that. But what surprised me, I don't know, maybe this is an unusual experience, I thought it would be a more universal one, is that when I started out editing my own audio, it was absolute fucking torture. I hated every second of hearing my own voice. But after doing it for a couple of years, it was like a switch went in my head, and the voice I hear when I speak it sounds in my own head now like what I hear recorded, and there isn't that dissonance there anymore that used to be so off-putting when I was listening to myself. And I just assumed that happened for everyone. But from what you're saying, Travis, I mean, you must have edited so much of your own audio that I'm kind of surprised that hasn't happened.
I don't
Is that
cast
not
myself.
a universal thing?
I tried to cast myself. It's annoying because I'm also trying to critique the performance, and I know what I'm looking for in a performance. I know what I want out of a performance, and then I can't, like, if I forgot to cast someone, I can't be like background guy 7 who gets hit in the head with a hacky sack or something. I can't be that Scream because I'm also the main character, like that, or I'm a side character. But no, I used a lot of filters and reverbs and compression and just try to like make it not sound like me, please. And I did a whole actual play where I took myself out entirely. Like, I had someone else be the DM voice, Liberty Vigilance. I was able to get Wayne June, who narrates a lot of the Lovecraft stories, to replace me.
Good God, yeah.
He sounded brilliant. And then I felt so much better not having that weight on my shoulders, because editing Wayne June is a blast. Editing me is not as fun for me. But I did get over it to an extent. I can do it. But I always have to have someone else sort of check if the acting is good, if it's not a narrative performance, because I don't trust myself to, if it's not like sad, I can do sad pretty easily and I can understand what sad sounds like. But if it has more nuance than that, I have a tough time being objective against my own voice because it's annoying to me.
That's fair.
Still, I never got over that.
We've had a question in from the audience, and yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm not sure how to tackle it myself, but I'd be interested in your thoughts, which is, do you think RPG podcasts and actual plays will evolve in the future? And if so, how?
I mean, I think they are evolving because actual plays are available in every spectrum of edit and detail, of sophistication, or
Scripted,
roughness, scripted. Although, if it's scripted, I'm wondering if it is a game anymore, or if it's just a story that you're telling. But for example, with the games that I run with Modern Mythos, I choose to have as low of an editing hand in these games as possible. So it really does sound as if you are at the table with us. So it includes, the fall of dice. Little Foley there for you. It includes, people, chit-chatting sometimes and making jokes at the table. But we do try and stay, fairly on focus because all of the games that I'm running are online. It is not a literal friends at a table, each of us mic'd up, or a single mic on a tabletop, and we're just kind of talking around that mic. I mean, it is, people at their homes, and we're all online playing. And I think that actually assists in helping to keep the focus straight, keep it to the game, because we're not being actually distracted by being at a table with, whatever else that may be going on around us. And so, that kind of works for us, where it's a very light. But I've also been, a part of games that have been recorded, and there's been a much heavier editing process that's been in on them, where background music, or sound effects get added in, where they do tighten up the mechanics. So they might keep in a game master asking for something, but then they tighten it up to where it's just ask for this and here's the result, that kind of thing.
Yeah, like the alien game we played together on How We Roll was edited very much like that.
Right. You meant to say the Emmy Award-winning game we played with How We Roll.
Yes, that one.
That one. Yeah. So that was a much more edited game, and you are seeing these extremes, the spectrum. I meant to say, not the extremes. There's a whole spectrum of actual plays available to be found, and I mean, I don't know if we can imagine where it would go. I mean, right now those are going to be, audio will be advancing, and there's going to be more video, and then what happens after the video? I mean, there are people who are doing live stage audio, actual plays.
Madison Square Garden sold out.
Right? I know, exactly. We're going to the Super Bowl halftime is an actual play game, so we're going to do that instead, right?
But in all seriousness, these evolutions are happening. It is becoming more mainstream. They did sell out Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable to anyone to think about 5 years ago. You have shows that are 2 people, shows that are 1 person, shows that are, you can't call it actual play, but it's because they don't identify as actual play, but they're actual improvisers. It's an improvised show. You've got Mission to Zix, which is also that super full scale editing. It doesn't feel like an improvised show because they put on vocal filters for the spaceship, who's one of the characters. And they also have like an orchestral soundtrack and such. And you've got like my show Dark Dice is the same thing. We make our own soundtrack and do crazy stuff, but it is at its core, it's a game, and the dice kill players in ways that we don't expect. And we don't know the outcome when we start and go in. You also have ones that more, they cheat in a fun way because they're there to tell a story and they want to tell that story specifically. Or I don't know, I wouldn't call it scripted necessarily, but some do use scripts. We don't. But there's, in terms of the spectrum of what we can do and evolve to that's new, I think our medium is rapidly shifting toward more professional video content. And we're seeing a better distribution with things like Purple Worm Run Faster and what's the other one that, my brain is gone. But there are other ones out there that are being distributed.
Yeah, Beetle and Bard or something like that, right?
Not Beetle and Bard. Ned Donovan's one. What's Ned's show? No, Encounter Party, I believe, which is also visual. You can get it on, I think, Amazon, and it's a lot of fun. But these shows are adapting, evolving, and the professionalism has gone up. There's a celebrity involvement in some of the shows. Celebrities have been involved in some major shows, ours included, because I just thought it'd be fun. I didn't really think we'd get noticed. But The only other place of evolution that I see potential for that hasn't been done beyond like minuscule, okay, we did it in surround sound, which no one has. Podcasts can't do surround sound by default because you're in MP3 in limited 441. But if people wanted to, and I don't know that it would be even a good thing, but I suspect there will be AI-based stuff where you have an AI DM or a computer, or you get into some things like that where you get back to sort of those green screens, but now it's like reading to you with MS Sam, like, wouldn't it be nice to have a computer that can talk to you? Do you go left, north, or south? I could see something like that kind of evolving and maybe taking it to creepy places. I don't know that it's good, though.
So a friend of mine, again, for I think with AI, it really is a better and worse kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
But there is opportunity. He was playing, for example, a game that was sort of set in like a Roman Greco kind of world, very ancient, and he used a very early, like back when it was like super basic AI image generating software to create Oracle images. He would type in basic prompts of just whatever nonsense, a red falcon flying into the sun or whatever. And he would show that to the players as like the visions that they received from the gods. And it was just up to them to interpret that however they could. So like little tools like that are ways to sort of add into the existing mediums that you're talking about.
Well, and also, one thing that you touched on there, Travis, was the role of, well, you mentioned celebrities being involved, but I think even beyond that, that a lot of the more successful actual plays, particularly in video, but also in audio podcasts, are ones where the cast members are professional actors, improvisers, comedians. And that's a real change from the kind of actual plays that we were listening to, say 10 years ago when they were in their infancy. I know certainly, from my own experience, I've gone from, on Ain't Slayed Nobody particularly, playing with a bunch of people who were primarily gamers to in some of the games that we've played where I'm about the only person there who's not a professional actor or comedian, and it's a very, very different experience. It's quite an intimidating one when you're suddenly playing with people who are just so fast with jokes or plot twists, who can really embody a character the way that most gamers would like to be able to, but haven't been trained in doing. And it leads to a very different kind of game to listen to than you'd experience in your own game at home.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. These things can be separate, and celebrity shows have existed. Geek and Sundry had some, but then you also had My Brother and Me, who then became celebrities. So there's sort of both sides of it. People who are now big because they have an actual play, and then people who are big going into actual play, and for better or for worse. We try to work with a lot of first-time players who haven't even played the system. Each season we try to do that, but other shows are kind of the same or a mix. A lot of times I've also seen where you've got like Anthony Rapp is in a group with like 4 people who just play D&D. They're just D&D people. I think that was also in Counterparty, like an earlier season.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's definitely a weird dynamic when it comes to any sort of social media occupation, is that you can start off where the entire appeal, right, is that it's very down to earth, it's very casual, it's very like just friends around a table having a good time. But then if it is really good at capturing that feeling and it becomes popular, well, then how popular does it become before it's like formally professional? And how do you, in a professional capacity, still capture and maintain genuinely that casual nature? That can be a really difficult thing to strike, I think. And then John, I think you're saying things like, the dice rolling on the table and a few of those little flubs. It kind of helps in that way to keep it like more honest. And it really is a very, I think someone used the word spectrum earlier, between like 100% we have, like Travis, what you're doing, like professional actors and voice people and editing and all this, and then completely on the other end is like very, very little to try and just keep it like a group of people having a good time. And there's an audience for all of it, right? It's all valid in some way or another. It's just different settings, different environments. Like I like the way I've been thinking about it, listening to the two of you talk about your approaches is like if I'm doing the dishes or like doing household chores or like putzing around and I'm not always able to pay perfect attention, I want to listen to John's games because it's going to be fun, casual, having a good time. If I'm like driving on the freeway at 2 a.m. for like a couple hours and I need to kind of stay sharp and focused, but I have nothing else that I can do, I want to listen to Travis's game with all the little sound effects that I can really like tune into, you know?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, because in my games, if you missed what someone said, context will bring you up. You know, but with Travis's, if you miss something, I feel like you would want to like, what did I miss? I need to go back and savor that, roll that back and get it. You know, because you would want to be invested in each and every one of those. It's also interesting that actual plays, at least my perspective with them, the different shows. And I think maybe the producers and the shows themselves could maybe get a little better in trying to message this out. But different actual plays have different things that they're trying to achieve. If I can't really put that in a better way, but there are shows, and I'm going to use Call of Cthulhu since that's my wheelhouse as an example. There are actual plays where they want to play the big campaigns. We're going to play Masks of Nyarlathotep. We're going to do horror on the Orient Express. And these are incredible investments in everyone's time. You know, the player's time, the listener's time, the amount of editing at whatever level of the spectrum that you're editing. But, you know, there are those campaigns, and that is, you know, it may or may not include celebrity voices. It's probably, you know, it's designed to, you know, give the listeners the full experience of what it is, you know, about this campaign. Because how many people have heard about some of these campaigns, but versus played in them. Mm-hmm. And so listening to these actual plays might give someone the opportunity to where, hey, I'm going to vicariously play in this campaign, even though I don't think I myself will get to play in it. That's one thing versus, you know, maybe a D&D style game where it's a sandbox, and the thing that we want to push, you know, the agenda that we're kind of putting in this actual play is these are the lives of the players, of their characters, and we're just going to explore how these lives unfold in this sandbox. We don't have a destination we're going to. We're not trying to, you know, save the princess or you know, defeat that dragon, or, you know, we're just going to be in this sandbox. Small things will come up, right? We're going to, you know, get little jobs, maybe do a heist, you know, maybe try and go to a gala, you know, maybe try and save someone who got kidnapped because that happened, you know, because we were making these other decisions and that kind of thing. And that it feels like those kind of shows are the ones that seem to feature a lot of these professional actors, people who can really, you know, trained actors who can get into a character and really embody that character, and that can be incredibly entertaining, right? And then you have, you know, what I like to try and do with my actual plays, which is I like to try and go small. So again, going back to Call of Cthulhu, in the realm of Call of Cthulhu, you know, you have the fantasy Massachusetts area that Lovecraft and some of the other writers kind of put together. So you've got, you know, Arkham, the city of Arkham doesn't exist. City of Kingsport doesn't exist. Innsmouth doesn't exist, right? Dunwich. So all this, and the river Miskatonic, right, doesn't exist. All this is kind of the Miskatonic Valley. And so in my actual plays that I do, I run this thing called a Living Miskatonic Valley campaign, where I'm doing all these like small, you know, these are published scenarios. I find published scenarios. Sometimes it's ones that I've written. Sometimes it's others, that others have written. But I find these published scenarios that are set in the Miskatonic Valley. So we're not globetrotting. All the characters are basically local yokels, and anywhere that we're adventuring to is within a drive time. But because the scenarios are smaller ones that might take 3 or 4 sessions to play, I'm having a lower input, or my players have less time that they have to dedicate to play. Right? These players can play for this session. Great. We're going to tell this story, and it'll have a certain ending. And when that ending happens, we bring in other players that are all part of the same realm. And the whole unifying thing is a social club. They all are members of a certain social club, and it's it's like a Rotary or something, right? And so these 4 guys from the Rotary decide to go do this thing, and one went insane, and 2. The second one, died or something. And then the other ones came back, and then the 2 that came back joined these other 2, and now these 4 guys are going into a different campaign. Yeah. So I can have players come in and out, and it could be a living campaign. So the characters can still level up and grow, but you don't have to have the same players all the time. It can be a mix and match, and that seems to work for us, and we're having a good time with that.
Yeah, well, and what you said there is not only does it require less time from the players, but it requires less investment, like long-term, from the listeners as well. If they want to dip in, they can join, and they're not going to be like, oh, and if you want to understand this episode, you got to go back through the former 83. It's like, oh no, I can just I can maybe hop back 2 episodes, and I'm caught up, which is, like you said, it's all about the function, the purpose that you're trying to get after with your particular narrative style.
I would say...
And I think there's a couple of other purposes. No, sorry, Travis, please carry on.
I know within the purposes that you're talking about, it can be, if you have a show with a backlog of 50 episodes, and you have to experience all 50 before you can get to the newest one, that can be very intimidating as a listener.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's we're kind of in the same boat of, we have short seasons, and by the end, hopefully the whole cast will be dead. We'll have a new cast the next season.
Yeah.
But I think another thing that Actual Play podcasts can do is to explain games. I mean, you were talking about, John, experiencing vicariously the big campaigns. But I think also, once you move outside the big RPGs like D&D and Call of Cthulhu, that Actual Plays can be quite good, almost teaching tools for you to learn a new game system if you've just picked up, say one of the Brindlewood Bay games or something like that, and you haven't got a clue how to run it from reading the text. Not that it's a badly written game, but it's easier sometimes to learn
something about
by listening.
How I learn. I'm horrible at reading a rule book and then knowing how to. It's something about it. It never clicks for me. But then the minute I see someone playing, oh, that makes sense. And now I can read through the rule book and I know what I'm looking at. It's so for sure. Yeah,
I'm totally the same way, because I'm also I have so many hobbies, but I enjoy board games, and I will watch the playthrough videos of board games on YouTube to learn a game, and then I can and it will inform me enough where I can go, I want to buy that game, or I could just play my friend's copy. Versus whether I want to purchase it or not. But
Backwater Bastards is a fun show where they were building a system and playtesting the system while they were doing it. It was really cool to hear it adapt. It's many episodes. It's a long-standing story with 3 people, but they're a riot. They're quite fun. It's a space adventure system that the main guy basically wrote and playtested as they were going through, and modifies as they get a bit further.
Well, and also along the same lines as learning the game, I think some people, this is something that I've heard from listeners to some of the actual plays I've done, listen to actual plays because they're starting out as GMs and perhaps haven't had a lot of experience of running RPGs and want to listen to other people do so to get a better idea of how it's done and learn some tips, techniques and so on. Which, I mean, as someone who runs a lot of actual plays, I actually find weirdly intimidating because I don't want to be responsible for that. I can barely hold it together myself. But at the same time, it is somewhat gratifying when people, contact me on social media and sort of say, I'd learned so much about GMing from, hearing you run such and such. Oh, okay. If I'd known you were paying that much attention, I would have tried to do a better job.
That's always a reliever. I've had a few moments in my own field where I've had like young reenactors walk up to me and be like, "Oh, I got into this because of you," and I'm like, and that's first of all, it makes me feel really old because I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I've been listening to you since like middle school." I'm like, "Oh, how long ago was that?" "Oh, you're in college now. Okay, great." But
it gets worse, Brandon. It gets worse.
I'm sure it does. But no, but for sure, like I mean, I'm sure the same exact thing. I'm sure that all of you have stories about people who have become more emboldened in their play, who have become better DMs, who have gotten into the hobby because of your products. And that's another, I used the words earlier, humbling and cool and scary. Absolutely, it's in those categories.
We're a bit on the opposite side. Like, because we edit everything out, we edit all the rules out, you basically just get a story. So people, sometimes they'll pick up playing D&D because of it. They're like, yeah, that sounds fun. I can maybe try and figure out the rules on my own and like start an adventure. But we also sell our campaigns as adventures. So I guess that kind of counts. But in a way, it's also like people, I'm always excited when I hear people are getting into a game because of something we made.
But do you think that actual play podcasts, I mean, the ones you've been involved with personally or ones that you listen to, do they set realistic expectations for people about what an RPG session is actually like? Or are they just a completely different beast?
It depends, because you've got the Matt Mercer effect, and that's definitely not a normal table. And Matt Mercer's a great DM playing with seasoned actors who know improv, and their game is a different game than even I would play. Because I mostly play with like my German instructor, or like even for like our actual play podcast, it's mostly just people I know who I think sound cool. Or for our home games, they're completely different than what we create. So for entertainment, when I'm running Dark Dice, my goal and the goal of everyone there is to tell an amazing story. If you get a disease, but you have the spell Cure Disease, well, that's not interesting. Unless maybe you decide to embrace the disease because you're going a little bit batty. Maybe this is now a new personality flaw you've got. The characters, the players at these scripted actual plays, not scripted, these improvised actual plays, these actual shows that are there to entertain audiences, want their characters to be memorable. And if that means killing their character, betraying the party, splitting up the party, it's for the entertainment of others, not themselves. I mean, they want to be entertained.
Set of priorities.
Yeah, and then like at my home games, I would never pull half of the cruel, mean tricks that I do on the show, and I don't. Unless I have complete and total buy-in, and that's what they want to do. Like this, I play with somebody once a year, and every time this guy, Molnar, is like, my character's going to die by the end, or go insane by the end, or actually he's going to be the villain by the end. Like, Will, I got you. We're going to have a great time. But like everyone else, I would never do that I would not subject them to that trauma, because that's my entertainment life, not my play life.
Oh, you're more disciplined than I am, because I find that it bleeds over now into my home games, where I've got so used to, in actual plays, making those suboptimal or chaotic decisions that I know are going to be fun, that I think for home games I'm an absolute nightmare to play with now, just because I bring the same energy to those games.
Yeah, I never play a competent character. They're so dull, right? Not evil, not bad, but just not the best at their job, you know? I once had a druid who didn't know that he was a druid. He just thought that he was really talented and he was a hunter. he was a huntsman and he didn't realize that it was like magic that he could climb up walls and transform. He just thought it was like scientific potions that he had. It was great.
Brandon, you're gonna love this. So we do this historical accuracy thing where like most people are illiterate, and one of the guys who happens to be literate because his character is like a noble, he keeps constantly like passing notes to other people, and they don't know what it means. It's just
It's wonderful.
and it's vital information to the story. And they're like,
Oh,
someone passed me this. I don't know what it means.
Wonderful.
Oh, I love that.
Nice.
How about you, John? Do you have an opinion on? It sounds like the actual plays that you're involved with personally are probably a lot closer to people's home games. But do you still approach them as performances, or are they just like home games that you happen to record?
I do. I'm conscious of the fact that we are telling, because with a lot of Call of Cthulhu games, you're solving a mystery. And so a mystery has the beginning and the investigation and then the conclusion. And so I am normally conscious in trying to keep players and their characters involved in this story until we get to the conclusion. Once we're in the conclusion, it's no holds barred. Characters might die, or go insane or something. But it's less satisfying if a character during the investigation portion made choices in such a way that they get taken out of the story, and then you kind of have to engineer and shoehorn a way for them to have a different character. And so far, I've only had to have that happen once, where even though I telegraphed this character had a grenade, and so the bad guys were coming with a grenade, he was like, "I'm holding my ground," and I was like, "Okay, man." And so he did not die. That was on the upside. Did not die, but he was so terribly wounded. I'm like, well, there's no way you're going to get to continue with this, right? You have to be hospitalized. So luckily, this party had a local guide, and I was like, guess what? You get to be the local guide now. And so he just became the what was an NPC became a PC.
Yeah.
And so he was able to, stay with us and was relevant as a player until we got to the conclusion, and then all hell broke loose. But when I do have a home game, again, even though these are all guys we're all playing online, and it is a totally different game, right? We're playing a D&D game, a fantasy game. It's not D&D, but we are playing a fantasy game, and so it's a sandbox, and we're exploring an area, and for that, they can do it. I don't know why these guys make certain decisions, and I'm just like, we had just started, and I'm like, just run away. It's okay to run away. And then there was a puzzle, and they had the answer. They knew how to solve the puzzle. I'm like, you just have to turn this in the door.
Yeah, but none of them could read the instructions.
They just stood there, and thankfully in those games you've got magical healing, and I'm like, all right, well, even though you got your skull bashed in, here's a magical healing, just pour the healing potion on his remains, and then he reformed or something. But I'm like, guys, why? And then after it I was like, why didn't you run away? And they were like, I guess we could have run away. I'm like, and then later they know they're inside a goblin den, and they're trying to be sneaky, but then they went into this one room, they let one goblin run away, and I was like, he's escaping, and they're like, yeah, we'll get him later. I'm like, he has brothers. No, we'll get him later. I'm like, okay, all right. It took all my willpower to just leave, just get out of here. Let's go to a different encounter. I will kill you all in here.
You brought up a very good point, though, which is the intent of what you're doing. So actual plays, you've got an intent. You're entertaining, or you're having fun and you're recording and documenting your fun, or whatever it happens to be, or you're trying to make a bazillion dollars, but you shouldn't be podcasting, but that's okay. The other side is the table. What's your intent? Is this to empower your players Is this like an adventure through a world to explore somewhere you've never been before in sandbox? Like, I can't do sandbox stuff at all. Even in fantasy, I always have like, okay, we're going to run Curse of Strahd, or we're going to run like Death House or something, like a very specific objective. I can't do, or Yawning Portal has a bunch of really great one-offs, or Wild Sheep Chase. Like, the intent of your party, beyond what do you want to play, is also like the theme. Is this a swords and sorcery? Is this a mystery? Is this a lot of puzzly stuff? Is this can we do horror? Are you comfortable with being scared? And I get a lot of, my main group has 2 people who just don't do horror. So I can't do horror with them. And it also has to be in German because I live in Germany and everyone here speaks German. So I'm playing in German and trying not to do anything scary while running through these adventures. So like the intent of your party is really also your friends, something to keep in mind, their goals and your goals and what your shared goals should be.
Yeah, there are a million little factors with whatever it happens to be, and all of those are going to play into that real question of how representative is this of, because of course as well then it also depends on the table of people that's playing, right? It's not just on our end, but it's on the audience's end as well, is how, how much does that table care about min-maxing and getting levels and mechanical gameplay, you might say, as opposed to role play or exploration. Like Travis, for my part, I never really cared too much about like really, really, really deep character interactions. For me, it's much more of like, show me an interesting world and let me explore it, right? I want to see all the different little elements about what makes it work, right? So that's why I enjoy games that are a bit more open-ended and whatnot. Whereas it sounds like you're again like the exact opposite there. And so if I'm listening to one of your games, right, and then I go to play something like that with my group of friends, it's not going to be representative at all, right? Even if it, like, I don't think it's a question as much of the medium as it is the everything else around that medium.
Let me show you how cool your character is, though, Brandon. I'm sure
it's
amazing. That's fair, though.
Well, I think we're coming up to, I think the last 20 minutes or 15 minutes. So let's close with a couple of questions then. So the first one is, how would you try to make, if you were starting a brand new podcast now, how would you try to make it stand out in what is now an absolutely saturated market for actual play podcasts?
First, I would have a cry because starting over sounds...
But everything new you make is technically starting over. Like when I release a new podcast,
okay, that's true.
It's completely from my audience doesn't just migrate. I will say.
Yeah. But one thing that I always like to tell people when they are like first starting out with, whether it's podcasting or YouTube, really any sort of creative endeavor, as a little bit of advice, not so much as a way to like stand out, but for them personally, is don't be paranoid about making everything perfect, right? Don't look at the finished product of people who have been doing it for years on end and say, wow, why am I not getting that, right? Why am I not to that level? Instead, I think just, do what you can for the first one, then identify a single element of that project and improve on that, right? Focus on that. So if that's your audio quality, if it's your writing, if it's your whatever it is, if it's your equipment, focus on one factor at a time and try to improve that, right? Because it's never going to be perfect right from the get-go. And by the time you're 100 projects in, podcast, videos, whatever, you're going to look back at the first one and be like, oh wow, that was a completely different world than what I was thinking I'd be able to do. And so, like be forgiving for yourself, right? Be easy on yourself. And when it comes to standing out, it's such a cliche, but I mean, yeah, be yourself. Don't try to ape someone else's style, but do your own thing. And you know what? You don't have your own style yet. You don't really know what you're doing. But be patient, give it time, and explore different avenues to figure out what that style is going to be. But don't just look at, John or Scott's or Travis's show and be like, well, that's what I need, right? So I'm gonna, okay, well, I don't have the creaking leather, but I have an envelope, so I'm gonna do this in front of the microphone, and maybe I can get the same effect that he got. Like, well, don't worry about that, right?
I totally agree, and I think kind of dovetailing with that is we are all geeks about something, and and you're normally going to try and do a podcast. I'm making the assumption of this, that you're going to do your podcast in that which you are a geek of.
Yeah.
That you take pride and enjoy that thing, whatever that is, and part of that is you're going to know the avenues of communication that similar fans use, because you were already using them as a fan of that geek topic. And I don't know if standing out, being concerned about standing out, is even something that you should even worry about. Just making it as clean as you can and as uniquely yours, and put it out there and say this is my contribution to the fabric of this geek topic that we all enjoy, and so for me it's called Cthulhu, right? And it could be all kinds of things, right? But by putting it out there and advertising it, really, but letting other like-minded individuals know about what you're doing and how they can get to it. And then they'll tell two friends, and then they'll tell two friends, and so on and so on and so on. And so hopefully it will eventually, on its own merit of just being coming from the purity of what you're trying to create, it will stand out on its own that way.
Yeah,
as you continue to,
you will settle into your niche, whatever it happens to be. It took me quite a few different. First I was doing this, and then I was doing that, and I think really I'm only just now, after 7 or 8 years, and have been doing it full time for a while now. I think I've really finally settled into what I can do differently, right? It takes time. It's just a matter of doing it.
Release consistently. Whatever you're doing, release consistently. If it's monthly, cool. If you can commit to monthly, it's awesome on you. If you can commit to every 3 weeks, amazing. Every 2 weeks, wow, I don't know what you're doing, but that's really awesome. And if you can keep that up, really cool. Try not to burn yourself out. How to stand out in the genre of actual play. The more you can edit your show, the more everything that was stated here, follow your passion, follow what you love. This is all correct. This is all great. And I'm coming at this with a strange, weird hat on, the one that says, the question was, how do I stand out? And the answer is, if you can edit it down and show that you respect your audience's time and cut out the part where you guys took a 15-minute break in the middle. Okay, that's 15 minutes. The audience doesn't need to be there. If you want to go further and take out... I
mean, this almost sounds like you're joking there, but I have listened to actual play podcasts where they don't do that. And that just blows my fucking mind.
Yes. There's a bare minimum of editing. And if you do that bare minimum, that's cool. If you want to go above and beyond, that'll make you stand out more. If you want to not lean into comedy is very saturated. There are fewer horror shows. We're one of very few in the space. I know... Call of Cthulhu. There's some really great shows out there. The Call of Cthulhu Mystery Program. It's very comedic for the first season, but wow, does it get serious in 2 and 3? And it's really inspiring, and it's well edited, and it stands out to me because of these things. So the more polished you can make your show, the more you'll stand out. The less you dive into comedy, the more you'll stand out. And for growth, I would either lean toward Cthulhu or D&D. Both have the larger audiences. If you go with a different system, it is very difficult to find an audience. You're basically building from the ground up a new show, and you're teaching people a new system. D&D has a core audience that will gravitate toward D&D shows. It's not what we all want to hear, but it's just, if you want to strictly look at numbers, that could be a way to do it.
It's the base level. It's where people join in. It's what everyone thinks of. And I think you said respect your audience's time. That is absolutely, that's like the most important takeaway, I think, out of everything that we said here. I think there's many different ways, but one good way to get a sense for if you're doing so, listen to your own show. After it's all done and you're ready to upload, sit down, cup of coffee, whatever, listen to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And if you enjoy that time, fantastic, then you're on the right track. But if you're like 25 minutes in, you're like, all right, we're going to get to this part soon. And when I get to that part, then it'll be worth it.
Yeah.
You're showing that it's not, because no one else in the audience knows that the cool part's coming up. It has to be the cool part now if you're starting to get bored. So listen to it yourself.
And I'd say another thing that really helps if you're certainly trying to build up an audience for a new podcast is making connections with other podcasters. When if you're, say, starting out an actual play podcast, getting people from more established podcasts to guest on your show or vice versa, or there's any number of people out there who experienced GMs who have written scenarios that they might want to promote, or have written games that they might want to get out there in actual plays, and working with them and getting them to promote your podcast as part of promoting their game, and it all becomes a virtuous circle. And community is, I think, the biggest part of finding an audience for any podcast.
And reach out. Because you might be surprised at the people who are willing to work with you, even if you're super small. Like, don't reach out like, oh, well, I'm going to start it now. Don't do it for your first episode. Get a couple of things out there, but clean it up, like John has always been saying. Make it a product that you're proud of. And then if you can come to someone and say, hey, look, I'm new, I'm small, but like, this is what I've done so far. If the person looks at it like, oh, hey, this guy has promised, like, you might be surprised at the number of people, the quality of people who are willing to step down to help people out.
That is exactly how I got Jeff Goldblum. I was just like, wouldn't it be fun to play with us? And then like his agent's like, no. And then he overruled his agent. I was like, yes,
that's awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. It's easy to forget that so many of the people involved with RPG podcasting, well, everyone fundamentally involved with RPG podcasting, is at their heart just another gamer. They're just another geek who enjoys rolling dice and telling stories. And exactly. And giving them an opportunity, in a lot of cases, you'd be surprised at the people who don't get the opportunity to game as much as they do, and you inviting them on your podcast to play a game, that might be the first gaming they've got to do in months, and they'll jump at the chance. So
that's how I felt with Architerica when I did the actual play with that. I had never done something like that live at all, but it had been so long since I played an RPG. Like, ooh, okay, that sounds like let's do it. Sure.
Right. Well, I think we're just about ready to wrap up. But before we do, let's just go around and if each one of you would like to tell our viewers where they can find your stuff, what they should be looking out for that you're working on at the moment, and how they can follow you on social media. John, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Again, my name is John Hook. You can find me on Facebook, Discord, under my regular name, John Hook. My podcast is called Modern Mythos. My co-host is Seth Skorkowski, which fans of Call of Cthulhu and the Traveler role-playing game probably know him from his YouTube, his award-winning YouTube show. So it's really a lot of fun to have Seth as a co-host of the podcast. And you can find Modern Mythos on pretty much any podcatching device. We have a Libsyn website that's I can't remember can't string it off the top of my head. I can't remember what the URL is on that. But Modern Mythos is also available on Facebook and Discord. And we have we have a lot of fun doing that. So thanks for having me. This was
Fantastic.
great panel.
Oh, wasn't it just? Brandon, how about you?
So again, my name is Brandon Fischella. I'm an independent historian who's interested in telling the the personal stories of military history from the long 18th and early 19th centuries. You can find me on YouTube at Brandon F because I am not very creative in my naming conventions, or at nativeoak.org. That's the sort of the umbrella organization that I do a whole sorts of different things. There's YouTube videos, there's a book out, there's another one shortly around the corner, actually a fiction book. The last one was nonfiction. Now I'm working on a fiction project, historical, basically zombies in the 1790s. What happens? We'll find out. And do I have anything else to promote? I don't think I do. That's me. Again, thank you so much for...
How would people find you on social media?
So again, nativeoak.org is actually probably the most reliable way. I am Brandon Fischella on Instagram, and God, what even is my Facebook handle? I think it's just Brandon F and the Native Oak, something like that. YouTube is definitely the most clear-cut and concise way. Although honestly, after all this talk, kind of tempted to do a podcast now. Maybe we'll see one day. But yeah, for now. Again, thank you so much for having me on. That this was a lot of fun, and I appreciate your giving me the time. It was a good fun.
Oh, fantastic! And Travis, how about you?
We'll play into podcasting yet. I'm Travis Vengroft. You can find me on social media as Ven Travis, the first three letters because my last name's hard to spell. But I make Dark Dice. It's an actual play podcast about people getting murdered in the woods. Come for the horror, stay for the hurdy-gurdy, and the really creepy soundtrack, where the sounds of human teeth are actual human teeth. But
no, that's good.
Of course.
I hope they're all your own, or at least I hope that they're ethically sourced.
Ethically sourced, of course. I'm vegan. I've got to do that. But the other thing is, be sure to check it out for Friday the 13th, because you're only going to hear it Friday, and if you don't hear it on Friday, you're not going to hear it until the next Friday the 13th.
Oh, fantastic! And yes, I mean, if people want to contact me at all, I'm on Blue Sky, where you can find me. I'm Scott Dorward there, or at S Dorward. I'm on a lot of RPG discords, where I'm invariably Scott Dorward. Alternatively, if you want to listen to some of the podcasting stuff I do, my main gig is as co-host of the Good Friends of Jackson Lies, where we talk about Call of Cthulhu and horror media. Or I'm a regular cast member on a number of actual play podcasts, specifically Ain't Slayed Nobody, How We Roll, and Grizzly Peaks Radio. So thank you very much to all our panelists, and thank you very much to anyone who has stayed with us for this whole thing. If you want to stay on for a bit longer, I believe we are about ready to hand over for the closing ceremony of Illusion HorrorCon. So stay on the line.
And they are popping up. The other people of the Illusion HorrorCon. Thank you very much, Scott Dorward, for this fantastic and fun panel. Travis, Brandon, and John Hook. That was very fun to listen to. I feel very much intimidated right now, so I don't know what I should say because all I heard was like high numbers and lots of fun stuff. So I will hand it over to Crystal or Ryan to maybe give some other remarks because I'm very humbled that you joined us this Illusion HorrorCon 2024, the third time. And yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Again, thank you. Thank everybody so much. Thank you so much to our panelists. So the ones that are joining us here, the ones that have joined us for the entire weekend. Thank you to the moderators. It's really been amazing how you've basically helped us take this part of the job off of our shoulders so that we can actually kind of enjoy our own con. It was it was very stressful for us to moderate and also try to run the con at the same time. So thank you so much, moderators. Really amazing. And thank you, players. Thank you, GMs. This really doesn't happen without you guys. It's really, really humbled to see all the sweet messages on Discord. And yeah, thank you so much. Ryan?
Yeah, I just repeat everything that Dave and kind of Crystal just said. Like I like I said, you folks we look up to every single one of you. I usually say I get starstruck. It's like I'm meeting a Hollywood actor or actress, and like there was one point, like, I think it was Chaosium Con last year. I saw John Hook, but I could not walk up to John Hook. Or it was, but I don't know. But
I know he was so close, John, and yet so far away.
I did tell my bodyguards
John
to
bites
let
a lot
people
less than
approach.
you
It
like.
would have been fine. They would have tackled you later, but it would have been fine to approach. It's the going away that would have been hard.
okay, I'll know that for next time.
He's
But
just a nerd with bodyguards. It's
That's
okay.
excellent. Well, yeah, no, this is, yeah. Just thank you to everyone, the GMs, the panelists, the VIPs, the players, and yeah, like I've been doing this probably the online con stuff just as COVID hit. I wanted to kind of keep the convention life going when everything kind of shut down, and I think was 2020, I think. But yeah, through all that, I eventually met Dave and Crystal, and we are 3 years in and are steadily growing. I think our Discord server itself, I think we're up around close to 900 members now. And yeah, it's been a wild ride. And I think Dave threw up some stats. We've had this con 36 GMs, over 90 players over 3 days. And yeah, it's been growing. People are happy. And yeah, our main focus is raising money for charities. We don't charge anything for this. And yeah, we just want to stay inclusive to, just not one company, but all horror TTRPGs in general. And yeah, and one of the things that was also interesting to see throughout this con was just, well, people probably saw it in this podcast. Sorry, in this panel right here, where you have people who are from Call of Cthulhu, or people who are from D&D, or our first ever historian. It's nice to see all these people come together with different experiences and just tell their stories and kind of intermingle, because different conversations are sparked. And yeah, I hope the train keeps on going. And at the end of the day, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much from us at Illusion HorrorCon 2024, which has now concluded. We wish you happy holidays, a joyful end of the year. And Crystal?
Sorry. One more thing. Speaking of charities, we still have donations. We're going to be accepting donations through our website for various good causes, and every time you donate, you're submitted into the raffle to win a really great prize from one of our sponsors. So we will be holding the raffle on December 15th. That is Friday the 13th. Spooky, scary. Get some cool shit. And yeah, other than that, thank you so much. David, continue with the sign off.
Thank you very much. This was Illusion HorrorCon 2024, the third, and I hope there's many more to come with these fantastic panelists. Just keep on showing up and accepting our invites. Thank you very much. We're very humbled for you all guys to join and talk about these fantastic stuff that we have no clue about. So thank you again very much. This is very amazing, and yeah. I hope we see you again next year in one form or the other, or throughout the year if you're interested. And yeah, thank you again, Scott Dorward, for moderating the last panel at Illusion HorrorCon, and Travis and Brandon and John to join as these fantastic panelists talking about podcasts and actual plays. So thank you again. And with that, I think we will be signing off and giving us all a good rest for the end of the year. And with that, I will say goodbye and thank you from us.
Bye-bye.